inside the probation service. From trendy to tradition, celebrate the new season. Daily business news you need, only on CMA. This segment is brought to you by Xeon Corporation. Live your life beyond the ordinary. Uncover luxury living with exceptional homes. Discover premium developments at the most coveted addresses in Singapore, with choice selections from districts 9, 10, and 11, and the new downtown. As well as interactive virtual experiences to help you find your dream home. Find out more at cna.asia/exceptional homes. Presented by CNA Luxury and Property Guru. And supported by the following partners.
Separated by politics and ideology. Recent development has opened up an exciting new world. I'm Lim Yang-suk, CNA Seoul. Is what we're having for lunch affecting our work productivity? I put it to the ultimate test.
We actually saw a dip in his attention levels.
And find ways to beat that dreaded post-lunch slump.
What can I eat for a very important meeting?
Is lunch affecting my work? Talking Point, Sunday on CNA.
A newly released Australian study has found for the first time that just 2% of the Great Barrier Reef has escaped bleaching since 1998. That was the world's hottest year ever, a record that's been repeatedly broken as climate change accelerates. But researchers say all is not lost. Corals on the world's largest reef system could still thrive if global warming is kept to 1.5 degrees Celsius. Australia's Great Barrier Reef has suffered 3 mass bleaching events during heat waves in the last 5 years. Bleaching occurs when healthy corals become stressed by spikes in ocean temperatures. This causes them to expel algae living in their tissues, draining them of their vibrant colors. The study found corals adapted to have a higher heat threshold if they survived a previous bleaching event. But the gap between bleaching events has shrunk, giving the reefs less time to recover between each episode.
The Great Barrier Reef bleached for the first time in 1998. We've now seen 5 more events. 3 of those were over a period of just 5 years. There's no time to lose for world leaders to collectively rein in greenhouse gas emissions, and the sooner that action takes place, the better.
Findings come during a landmark United Nations Climate Summit in Glasgow, where Australia committed to reaching net zero carbon emissions by 2050. But it failed to announce a more ambitious 2030 target. Researchers have called on Australia to do more to cut greenhouse gas emissions before there is irreversible damage. The vast underwater ecosystem supports 65,000 jobs in reef tourism.
If we can hold global warming to 1.5 degrees global average warming, then I think we'll still have a vibrant Great Barrier Reef. It'll look quite different from the Great Barrier Reef of 20 or 30 years ago, but it will still support an important tourism tourism industry, and will still be there for people to enjoy. But if we go to 3-4 degrees of global average warming, which is tragically the trajectory we're currently on, then there won't be much left of the Great Barrier Reef or any other coral reefs throughout the tropics.
The shrinking population of Lake Fagabin in northern Mali is set to come under further pressure from climate change. Since the lake dried up following disastrous periods of drought, communities on its parched shores have had to find ways to keep sand dunes at bay, while efforts to restore the wetlands have been derailed by conflict.
This was once one of the largest lakes in West Africa, Lake Fagabin. But since it has completely dried up, communities in northern Mali have had to defend their homes from encroaching sand dunes and find new ways to scratch a living from the degrading soil. More than 200,000 people have had to abandon their traditional livelihoods since the river started to disappear following catastrophic droughts in the 1970s. Abdul Karim Al-Hassan is a farmer turned herder. Other farmers like Mahamadou Osman say tensions are high between livestock herders and other farmers over the little fertile land and water available. He said regular disputes have led to rising levels of crime. Many have left the area due to the lack of economic opportunities in the area. Former farmer Musa Mahamadou Toure said his family survives on what his son sends home from the capital Bamako. The UN climate body said average temperatures in northern Mali are expected to rise up to 4.7 degrees Celsius. That's an increase of over 40 degrees Fahrenheit. There were efforts to boost resilience by restoring Fagabin's wetlands, hoping to make the area the breadbasket of the Timbuktu region. But that has been derailed by waves of conflict, including the most recent Islamic insurgency, according to a 2016 study in the African Journal of Aquatic Science. In the village of Bintagongo, the advancing dunes have buried a schoolyard and cracked the anti-building foundations. Hama Abakun is the mayor of the village.
Get the latest from leads around the country, including pro tips and parental info from the experts.
In Singapore, it was another muted celebration of the Festival of Lights, the second year in a row. Amid the pandemic, many devotees still found ways to offer their prayers and usher in new beginnings. Natasha Razak with the story.
There were snaking queues of devotees at this temple on Tank Road. They were determined not to miss out on this year's Deepavali celebrations. To enter the temple, they had to adhere to safe management measures. First, checking in with the Trace Together app or token, and leaving the temple right after their prayers. The temple's president says it was a smooth process as devotees observed the rules.
All the temples, they are restricted, devotees, only vaccinated. But, the kids also will come, This is an important festival for the Hindus. So that is why we allow everybody, but we make sure that at any point of time, inside the temple, only 50 people. If the crowd is, more, then we put outside also barricades. So we will stop the crowd, routed through the outside barricades.
As part of the morning ritual, devotees offered their prayers, all the while keeping a safe distance from each other and with their masks on.
We've been coming here for every Diwali for the last 10 years or so. Very, very good. We start our Diwali with the visit to the temple, and that makes our Diwali come alive.
Today, I thought that I couldn't make it to the temple because of the number of cases increasing. So I feel very good that at least we can come and pray on this festive occasion.
Over at this temple at Marsiling, about 800 devotees turned up to give thanks and celebrate.
What's more important today is that, we are seeing, our migrant workers coming here as well, and how the community is coming together, both our local Marsiling residents and our migrant workers performing their prayers, and it's one big community coming together.
This temple in Yishun welcomed only vaccinated devotees. It could take in 150 people at any one time.
When we came in, the queue was long. We were surprised actually to see the long crowd, but actually it was well organized.
For ourselves, what we did something different today first day. We came to temple first because since we are not able to visit anyone.
The devotees also have a common hope, and that's for the situation to return to normal as soon as possible.
Charities in Singapore are feeling the crunch as the pandemic changes how people volunteer. According to the National Volunteer and Philanthropy Center, in-person volunteers in each of the past 2 years are barely half of pre-pandemic numbers. This comes as companies find creative ways to give back to society amid restrictions caused by the pandemic. Melissa go with more.
Companies like disinfection provider Speco are doing their bit for charity by meeting their practical needs. Speco stepped up when nursing homes and venues like elder care centers approached them last year.
A lot of them, they did not have the budget to do so. My team, one by one, they said, no problem, let's just offer them pro bono disinfection service. And we work double shifts, we work triple shifts in order to cover this entire area.
This year, they started a campaign to provide antimicrobial products to the hard-hit F&B sector.
We want companies to know that in times of difficulties, there will be people that are willing to help them. When things have gotten better, they would also take this step forward to pay forward to other companies, to other individuals.
Another firm has converted almost 100 unutilized annual leave days into cash donations to 2 charities.
We are considering maybe doing another round of this towards the end of the year because it's October when we are looking at our annual leave and the period that we have actually spent, we don't see much progress.
This is a shift away from the usual in-person volunteering the firm does, both in Singapore and abroad. Non-profit organizations like SPD add that corporates have taken the chance to think out of the box. Some engage beneficiaries online, while others offer their specialized services like counseling for SPD staff. Some have also asked their staff to lock their steps and convert that into donations. Still, there has been a shortage of volunteers made worse by COVID-19 restrictions like quarantine orders.
We used to have about 50 to 75% of our corporate volunteer hours, volunteering hours coming from the corporates, but now with the COVID, it has been significantly dropped.
According to figures from Giving.sg, there were about 1,900 corporate volunteers up till September. That's similar to last year, but only about half of the same period in 2019. The NVPC says companies can fill the gap by encouraging their staff to tap their skills and volunteer. And ahead of the festive season, it's also urging more people to rally their friends and contribute to charities.
In the next hour of Asia First, coal is no longer king. Dozens of countries vow to shift away from the dirty fuel, but major users are silent. And we take a look at one of the most contentious issues dominating COP26, the delayed $100 billion funding pledge by rich nations to help developing countries counter the impact of climate change.
And coming up in business, we'll get you the opening numbers from Tokyo and Seoul. Plus, we'll have the latest data on how much Japanese households are spending.
shots to the end zone.
Decarbonize, and we must decarbonize fast.
We are in a race against time. We have to think of this as a climate emergency.
We need to empower the individual to make good choices and be part of the solution instead of being part of the problem.
Discover the future of energy, materials and food on Climate Trailblazers. Wednesday, 17th November on CNA. Top stories in Asia.
A quicker, portable way of testing for COVID-19 in just 5 minutes.
It's breaking news in the US and Europe.
US President-elect Joe Biden is set to formally introduce his top economic team.
With an eye on markets opening across the world.
Wall Street's major indices all closed the month with double-digit percentage gains.
It's the one bulletin that offers you a global perspective. World Tonight, daily, on CNA.
From driverless cars.
We are now a global player dealing with global forces.
To food delivery robots.
90% of the value of food bought is built in Singapore.
The sky is the limit.
I hope to break down the technological barrier that industry partners are facing.
How is Singapore pushing technological frontiers? Becoming a global hub. Tonight on CNA.
Brought to you by the Ministry of Trade and Industry.
Hey guys,
This is Asia First.
It's 8 a.m. here in Singapore. I'm April Hong. Our top story this hour. The United States, New Zealand, and more than 20 other nations commit to halting public financing for fossil fuel projects abroad, one of the latest pledges out of the UN Climate Summit in Glasgow. But the US, along with China and India, declined to join dozens of countries in vowing to cut the dirtiest power source, coal.
Countries are turning their back on coal and towards cheaper, cleaner renewables. The end of coal is in sight.
I'm Teresa Tang. Also this Friday morning, we dig deeper into the climate crisis. We hear from someone who is a major skeptic of environmental, social, and governance investing. We speak to an expert about the challenge posed by climate migration as millions of people flee extreme weather and food scarcity. And we follow the money with a look at the $100 billion question facing rich nations, a target they've missed in the effort to help developing countries with climate mitigation and adaptation efforts.
This is a totemic figure, a matter of trust.
The 100 billion never appeared. Not only did it not appear, we don't know how much appeared.
Thinking about this does keep me awake at night.
Tough decision looms for tens of millions of Americans. The U.S. government sets January 4th as the deadline for private sector workers to be fully vaccinated against COVID-19 or face mask and testing requirements. Some states have already vowed to challenge the directive, saying it infringes on individual freedom.
I'm Henry Yin with Business News. Fresh data from Japan shows COVID-19 caution lingers in Asia's number 2 economy, with household spending falling, raising concerns about a Q3 GDP contraction. Plus, an earnings beat from Southeast Asia's largest lender, DBS, posts a 31% net profit jump, but the bank is raising concerns about the cost of living.
was the subject of debate on day 4 at the COP26 Climate Summit, as delegates sought to tackle the future of one of the worst sources of carbon emissions. 46 countries so far have signed up to move away from it.
And more than 20 countries have promised to end financing for international fossil fuel projects. Conference President Alok Sharma said with confidence that coal is no longer king.
The end of coal is in sight. In addition, 24 countries, including Canada, the United States, and Denmark, together with public finance institutions, have signed a UK-led joint statement committing to ending international public support for the unabated fossil fuel energy sector by the end of 2022.
There is also a pledge to phase out existing coal-fueled power plants and to stop building new ones, which received 77 signatories. Among them, South Korea, Indonesia, and Poland, all among the top 10 globally in terms of coal-fired power capacity.
But the agreements crafted as part of the UK's effort to consign coal to history look thin. Poland says it has not agreed to anything new. The US did not agree to stop coal development at home either.
The burning of coal represents the biggest single obstacle to meeting the Paris Agreement goal of limiting warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius, and moving to renewable and greener methods of energy production will be vital in order to halt climate change. CNA's Laura Macon-Isherwood with more.
Well, more than 40 countries have now pledged to phase out coal. 23 of those signatories coming here at COP26 in Glasgow. In terms of timelines, we're looking at developed nations hitting 2030s, and for those smaller nations with smaller economies, they've been given to the 2040s to try to achieve that target. It's led the UK COP26 President Alok Sharma to say the end of coal is in sight, but there is still some more work to do, and namely because large carbon emitters and users of coal, the likes of the US, Russia, China and Australia, have not signed up to this alliance and are not going to be sticking by that pledge. It's difficult because those are economies that are highly reliant on coal for not only their energy but also for jobs as well. And there's been a bit of another blow here today with Indonesia, one of the countries that signed up to a promise to try to end deforestation by 2030, has actually rolled back on that promise, with one of the ministers saying it would be unfair to ask them to stop it completely because it doesn't fit in with their development plans or goals. But at least some positive news today comes from the International Energy Agency. They have said that if all pledges made so far here at COP26 are stuck to, then global warming could be sitting at around the 1.8 degrees mark. Now, that's not exactly the 1.5 degrees that everybody here is aiming for, but it does sit beneath the 2-degree maximum that was set in Paris 6 years ago. However, there is still plenty of negotiations taking place, and plenty of people will be wondering if even more pledges can be brought about here and that 1.5 degree target can be met. Laura Macon-Isherwood, CNA, Glasgow.
A research fellow at a global think tank tells us that while renewable energy is the way forward, countries still need to protect workers and communities involved in the coal industry.
But research shows that actually there are lots of alternatives to coal, in particular renewables. Renewables are continuing to become more and more cost competitive and viable energy sources. You know, their costs have really come down in recent years. In some ways it's actually better because we can use distributed energy systems, so we can reach areas that need energy access in many countries where people don't even yet have access to energy by installing solar panels, etc. But we just need to make sure that the support behind it, the government financing behind these new technologies are there. Now, many others are also using natural gas, for example, which they see as a bridge fuel. Now, this is a risky strategy because, yes, in the short term, there might be some gaps being filled by gas, but we really need to be very careful about setting up ourselves for similar challenges with natural gas. We know that our current plans around this are not compatible with our climate targets, so it's actually much better to leapfrog and invest in clean technologies. We have to have a managed transition because people are involved in these sectors, and it's not just the workers. it's also communities who have been owing their livelihoods to these businesses, to mining and exporting coal. So we need to be very considerate about the transition for people involved in these sectors. And there are some excellent initiatives around just transition that we can see. So we had already seen, for example, in Germany, putting together a major plan of just transition away from coal, and around 40 billion euros behind this. We've seen in other countries like Canada, similar coal transition initiatives. We know that Korea, South Korea, Argentina, Chile have national plans or frameworks to tackle these issues through their climate plans.
The United States has set a January 4th deadline to enforce a vaccine mandate on tens of millions of private sector workers. The new regulations would affect American firms with at least 100 employees. That's around 2/3 of the country's workforce. The plan, first announced by President Joe Biden in September, requires employees to receive a second shot by January 4th, or else they'll have to wear a mask and undergo weekly testing. Employers are also required to provide paid time off for workers to be vaccinated. An estimated 37% of private sector workers are currently not vaccinated. New emergency rules were also released for workers in healthcare facilities and nursing homes. 17 million of them who are receiving either Medicare or Medicaid funding must now be vaccinated by the January deadline as well. Regular testing in lieu of receiving the vaccine is not an option for this group. In a statement, President Biden says that vaccinating is the best pathway for the country, and the requirements are necessary because too many people are unvaccinated for the U.S. to get out of the pandemic for good. Already, governors from Iowa and Indiana have vowed to fight the new rule. They argue that it infringes on individual freedoms. More states are expected to join them as well. The U.S. had earlier mandated the COVID-19 shot for military and federal workers, attracting lawsuits from nearly a dozen states who have denounced the regulations as unconstitutional. More than 2/3 of Americans have received at least one dose of the vaccine. That's nearly 223 million people. A significant proportion of U.S. citizens remain resistant to being vaccinated, and despite the mandates, Simon Marks explains how it remains difficult to persuade more people to take up the COVID-19 vaccine.
We talk a lot here about vaccine skepticism, but it's really vaccine refusal now on the part of a solid 80 million or so Americans. 70% of Americans have had at least a first shot of COVID-19. That's adult Americans, a statistic often repeated by the Biden administration. But what they talk about less is the fact that if you look at all eligible people for vaccination here in the United States, we're only at around 57-58% of take-up, the lowest level of vaccine acceptance anywhere in the G7. And so these moves by the Biden administration are aimed at forcing people's hands and making them understand that if they are not vaccinated, they will not have access to the employment that they currently enjoy. All of this, however, is absolutely guaranteed to get tested in the courts. And also, we're seeing some industry groups warning that it could create further dislocation to the economy.
We are suffering under real workforce shortages. We are suffering under supply chain issues, some of which are in turn due to workforce shortages. And so I'm really concerned about what's going to happen if employees in even marginal percentages decide that they would rather not work than be subject to mandates like this one.
And Republicans really, I think, salivating over the prospect to open up a new legal salvo in the culture wars here just 12 months before midterm elections that will determine whether the Democrats are able to keep their wafer-thin majorities on Capitol Hill or lose them to the Republicans. So this is going to be a complicated political issue that the country is going to be wrangling with legally for months to come.
Chinese President Xi Jinping has called for smooth global trade in vaccines and other medical supplies as unilateralism and protectionism rise across the world and globalization faces headwinds. At the opening of the China International Import Expo yesterday, Mr. Xi touted China's contributions to the COVID-19 battle while maintaining a zero-tolerance approach to virus control. Lo Minmin reports.
Gracing the 4th China International Import Expo via a video link, Chinese President Xi Jinping used his opening speech to tout the country's credentials on promoting free trade. He said China had been among the first countries to ratify RCEP, the world's largest trade deal, demonstrating the country's resolve to continue to keep its doors wide open. And the country is committed to continue sharing market opportunities with the rest of the world, he said.
中国将支持疫苗等关键医疗物资在全球范围内公平分配和贸易畅通。中国将推动高质量共建“一带一路”，使更多国家和人民获得发展机遇和实惠。
The China International Import Expo was first launched in 2018. It's meant to boost imports and close China's trade surplus with its trading partners. It was also seen as an effort by Beijing to appease then U.S. President Donald Trump, who had started a trade war with Beijing as he accused China of hurting U.S. jobs and national security through unfair trade practices. Trade tensions eased somewhat since President Joe Biden took office, and analysts said there has been a shift in China's focus to using the expo as a platform to project its image as a leader in global poverty reduction, as it pledged to open its vast market potential to developing countries by making it easier to sell to China. Lo Minmin, CNA, Shanghai.
Trade U.S. may have